our CEO and Creative Solutions Director, Nicholas Hall.
Good morning, everybody. Now, this conference is sponsored by OTC New Directions, which in January will probably change its name to Consumer Healthcare New Directions. Which is a look at what's been happening in the last year, and in particular, because this is a conference about innovation, and indeed the theme of our publication, OTC New Directions, is where innovation meets regulation. So this is, and Nina is the manager of the editorial team who set this weekly bulletin up, knows very well that we look at a cluster of stories that cover science, look at regulatory, look at new products, try to bring it all together, and very importantly, we try to look ahead. Now, this presentation is, this first presentation, the one that I and my colleague Bernadette de Villiers are going to give, is based on a report that we published a couple of months ago called New Paradigms 2019, Over the Horizon. We want to look less at what's happening today, and as an industry that is focused on innovation, we want to see what the future is likely to bring. Now, this is, as you know, this is an industry that's in a state of flux. There are many changes going on. We see it in a localized setting, but I'm sure all industry is in a state of flux. Great deal of uncertainty, on the edge of a possible recession, on the edge of certainly a trade war, hopefully no more than a trade war. So it's very easy to get locked into the immediate. What's happening this month, what's happening this year, next year. And there is a time when you need to step back and take a broader look at the potential for consumer healthcare. So, and that slide there is just a reminder to myself that we've been doing this for somewhat many years. We celebrated our 40th anniversary as a company 2 years ago. We're just about in 2 months' time to be 42 years of age. And I think I look pretty good for 42. Anyway, so let's look at the macro. And this is not as, for example, those of you who were with us at the Vienna conference in April, this is not going to be a statistical review. This is just going to take a snapshot of the market and then really is going to look forward at the products and the categories that will drive demand in our marketplace. But it is important to put a stake in the ground and have a benchmark. So what is the benchmark for the industry? So in 2018, if we take the two simple facts, not in dispute, a lot of what I'm going to say could be disputed, but not this. We know for a fact that the world population grew at just over 1% in 2018. And we know that the inflation rate in 2018 was 3%. If you put those together in a very simple way, we can set a benchmark that says that for any industry, if you don't have growth of 4% by value, then you're not keeping up with the macro characteristics of the world market. And interestingly, the world economy isn't keeping up because the global economy is actually growing at a lower rate than that benchmark. And the reason for that is that there is a lot of price depression around the world. Now, what happens in consumer healthcare? In the past, we as one of the three major data providers for consumer healthcare, the other two I acknowledge as great competitors, IQVIA and Euromonitor, but we have our way of looking at the market, they have theirs. If we were looking at just the retail market, we're looking at pharmacy, drugstores, supermarkets, health food shops, convenience sector, every shop where consumer healthcare can be sold, we don't meet the benchmark. In the last 12 months, the market has grown in volume by 3.7%. Now, historically, it's been ahead of the benchmark. This last year has been very, very tough. But it's not all bad news because there are two other sectors of the market that traditionally we have not been able to measure. One is multi-level or direct to the consumer. Companies like Avon and Amway, Herbalife, but actually they're doing even worse. With all the adverse publicity of pyramid selling, that sector is growing at only about 3.5%. But there is e-commerce, and e-commerce which at the moment accounts for 1 out of every $10, or 10 euros or 10 pounds, it doesn't matter. 1 out of every 10 units of currency goes through e-commerce. And that is driving the market. So that when we put it all together, and we as a data provider have been able to do that for the first time in the last year, our market has grown by 5%. So we're ahead of that benchmark, and that's good news. Now, is it good enough? Well, to judge by the major companies, not. And the reason is twofold. Most of the major companies want to show double-digit growth, although in actual terms, the big companies are not achieving double-digit growth except by acquisition, not by organic growth. But secondly, and I'm not going to show the data today, but it's there for anyone who wants to discuss it with us, the multinationals are actually underperforming the global growth rate. There are various reasons for it. High standards of compliance, not playing so strongly in the emerging markets, not being in the growth categories. There are many, many reasons. But the fact is that the multinationals are not the pioneers when it comes to market growth. That is typically entrepreneurs, local companies, and regional companies. But as an industry, in organic growth terms, it's looking pretty good, but it needs to be better. And that's why we wrote this report on New Paradigms 2019 over the horizon, and we're going to share some of those results with you today. So just to look at a little of the detail of what I've just said, if we look at the total market, historically, it's grown at 5.3%. The figure I gave you of 5% was a slight slowing down in 2018. Looks like that will be more or less what we have in 2019. We've got a figure of 4.7. My colleague Kaylee from our data team gives me these great forecasts, and it's amazing. They really are very accurate. So this year we think that for various reasons, the market will be slightly down in its macro sense, partly because of some weaknesses in the China e-commerce market, partly because of the second year of having no prescription to OTC switches of significance in the United States. The future is slightly better, 5.4% on the current business model. But if we can bring in the new paradigm, if we can make the new categories really work at the consumer level, the growth rate is potentially 7%. That's the upside. That's the best case. And here you'll see the retail market historically 4.5%, but most recently 3.7%. That's a real worry. A of course, some cannibalization of retail by e-commerce. And there's historically the direct sale, the Amway, Avon, Nutrilite, Herbalife, 3.5%, not a great future for that sector. And then here's e-commerce growing at 20% a year. I don't think it can sustain 20% growth, but what I do think is that within 10 years, e-commerce will be at least 20%, maybe even 25% of consumer healthcare purchases. It's very substantial. Everybody is playing there. The big worry for me is whether this is a category that goes generic. We see that one of the two big global players in e-commerce in terms of the platform, which is Amazon, the other is Alibaba in Asia, although those two are crossing over. Amazon has its own line of VMS products called Amazon Essentials, and they have, although they don't put the Amazon name on it, they have a line of dedicated registered OTC medicines in the US called Basics, and I don't think it will be long before they attach the Amazon name to that. So that's a concern, that e-commerce might go generic and have store brands in the way that the retail sector has. And all of that brings down the net yield per product. But that's all the market data I want to talk about. What I want to do now is to look at innovation and to look at the categories that we think will have the biggest impact on future growth in the next 5 to 10 years. So, the first thing to say is that innovation is a word that's lightly used and means very little. I don't think there is a single company that I work with, and in one way or another, we work with just about every company in this industry, that doesn't tell us innovation is one of our growth pillars. But innovation can be as simple as a lemon-flavored cough drop. And I've had companies say, we subscribe to innovation, and when I asked them to prove it, they said, we introduced strawberry flavor on top of our market-leading lemon. I mean, it has to be a little bit more than that. And just to show you how problematic this is, we have a great product called OTC Market Tracker, New Products Tracker, which Nina launched with her team a few years ago. This slide is slightly out of date now because we have over 20,000 entries, but for the last analysis we did for the report, we had 19,000. And what it does is, it takes all the new products that are launched in the 20 top countries, and for 5 years we've measured these launches. Now, we are looking at them at the point of launch. We don't have the historical data, of course, because it's a new product, and we don't have, at this stage, either the capability or the need to backtrack and say what happened later on such a wide base. We do this selectively for certain products. So we found, in this analysis, 19,000 new products that could be a completely new product to the market, or could be a simple line extension. And there's duplication. A line extension in 20 countries will count as 20 units. So there is duplication. Take this in its macro sense. And what this shows quite clearly is that on a subjective scale of 1 to 4, 4 being an absolute game changer. An example would be Viagra Connect in the UK, the first Viagra OTC product legally sold without prescription anywhere in the world. Several other countries we've had the ingredient under a different trademark, and we've got lots of blue pills sold on the internet, who knows where they come from. But 4 stars for Viagra Connect. I'll show you some other examples later. 3-star would be maybe not a complete game changer, but a very significant improvement on a formulation or a positioning, a delivery system. So the 3s and the 4s are the ones that you want to see more of, but they account for only 7% by number of the new products that we've tracked. 30% are 2 stars, and that's, well, that was interesting, it was useful, and 64%, 2/3 of the new products launched have no point of difference at all compared with anything else on the market. Now here I ought to say something that's very important and something of an antidote to what I've just said. When you do look back historically on some of these 1 and 2 stars, often, well, maybe I should change that word, sometimes they are very successful in the marketplace. Because when you surround a simple formulation with branding, with advertising, investment, creativity, trade strategy, these brands can do very well. So it isn't as simple as saying 97% of all new products was a complete waste of time. We are not saying that. But what we are saying is, in terms of genuine innovation, completely new benefits to a consumer, this is not what this industry does. This industry is very good at improving the benefits that we already have. Make them more relevant, present them better to consumers, make them more palatable, make the proposition more interesting, dress that up at point of sale. All of that is classic marketing, but it's very much the case that we sell well-known formulations which, frankly, anyone could have. So, with few exceptions, although we pride ourselves on our strong brands, this is essentially a branded generics business. And when you look at the location and the categories for these huge number of new products, Europe, where we have low market growth of about 2%, the compensation of manufacturers is to flood the market with new products. And it doesn't really work, because we've seen very little growth in the European market over time. And when you trade out some blips, so in some markets you have a high growth and then depression the next year. But if you look over time and you look over the whole region, Europe, despite all these launches, has not significantly grown because of these launches. It's also true to say that where you have a low regulatory barrier, for example in vitamins, minerals and supplements, in derma and lifestyle products, where it's easy to put a product in the market, our industry does that. Where it's harder, in cough, cold, allergy, GI and analgesics, where there's a much longer and more costly regulatory process, we see only a quarter of those launches. And I think that for our industry, we mislead ourselves if we think that innovation is just about formula and delivery system. And I'll come to that in a moment, because I just need to show you a bit more about this grading system we use. 1 to 4 stars, 4 is a game changer like Viagra Connect. Or Glenmark's Maaloff Protect, which has created a very small niche for consumers who want to prevent the possibility of malaria and will take this product. Now, it is clearly going to be a niche. We gave an award a couple of years ago to this because it was the first time anywhere in the world we'd seen an OTC product for malaria, but finally it turned out to be a very small niche. We gave 3 stars to this Swiss cannabis gum, and a couple of years ago that was a very original project. Now the world is full of them. And similarly, we gave 3 stars to an entry by Mars using the well-known benefits of cocoa as a way of providing some circulation and heart benefits. But innovation, as I say, is more than just a new formulation or delivery system. Smart marketers, and we have many smart marketers in the room, and they represent smart marketing companies, know that you can be innovative in the way you segment your market, the way you stretch your portfolio, the way that you manage the value proposition to consumers, the way that you communicate with consumers through advertising or other forms of media, including social media, very important. Your distribution strategy, the way that you surround your product with a good sales force activity level, going into new geographies, and sometimes a whole new business model. And we've worked over the years and are currently working with some amazing companies. So I'm not showing a case today, but many of you will have heard me talk about a Mexican company called Genoma. Genoma, 15 years ago, started with nothing. It started with an idea by a man who knew much more about filmmaking than medicine. He tells the story. Is it true? You never know. But the story is, he was sitting in a doctor's surgery and he wondered why, for a treatment, or for a meeting with his doctor about something very serious, and he had to wait an hour because people with very simple coughs and colds were going to see the doctor in Mexico City. He asked the question that we always ask, which is, why are those people in the doctor's surgery, why aren't they in the pharmacy buying the product with their own money? And he thought there has to be a way to get these people into the doctor's surgery. And in 10 years, he built a business with a value of $1 billion, well, sales of $1 billion, with a 28% net profit. He's now selling in 28 countries in the Americas. And what was unique about his business model was media. Because as a filmmaker and somebody who understood the media, he said, I have to dominate the media, but how can I do it as a startup? And he found a very, very clever way of doing it. He went to the biggest TV company in Mexico City and he said, am I right that you have lots of TV spots that you cannot sell at full rate card? And they said, sure. And he said, how many of your spots are you selling at only 5% of rate card? A lot. He said, I'll buy all of them. I'll buy every single one of them, but I'll pay you at the end of the year. So he got 1 year's free advertising, by which time he launched brands completely against the first rule of marketing. He chose brands that fitted the slot available. If he was buying slots at 2 o'clock in the morning, when most people are asleep, he said, this is for insomniacs, this is for young people, and he launched products that were going to be of interest to insomniacs and young people. Rather than what we do, which is we start off with consumer demand, and then we fit the media strategy to it. Complete reversal of classic marketing, and it worked. I've shown other examples. I've shown the example of Tony Ferguson, the two pharmacists who created, in 1 year, a $100 million weight loss business in Australia, just because they brought the power of counseling at point of sale to customers who presented as definitely needing weight loss products. So sometimes the innovation is a wholly different way of looking at the business model. All of these, by the way, are in our report, New Paradigms for OTC. But generally, we think in terms of ingredients, we think in terms of delivery systems, of course, prescription to OTC switch, although in the main market for switch, North America, we have seen no new switches with scale in the last 2 years, and I don't think we'll be seeing anything in 2020 either. But I'd be happy if you proved me wrong. So in the New Paradigms report, Over the Horizon, we've identified 15 infinity zones. Of course, there is no such thing as infinity, certainly not in business. Everything is finite, but we had to get attention somehow, so we called these infinity zones. And some of these are pretty obvious. I remember many, many years ago being accused at one of these meetings that there was no new news. And I said, I'm a journalist. I report the news that you create as marketeers. If you don't bring news to if you don't bring new newsworthy products or marketing strategies to market, my job as a reporter is made more difficult. Of course, we hope to stimulate our clients to do newsworthy things. At another one of these meetings, I was accused of inventing the future. I wish I could. I only try to predict it, and that's hard enough. So, for example, and I'm just going to look at a couple of these. Now, some of them are very obvious. So, for example, there's nothing new to say that prevention is an emerging trend. Over many years has been an emerging trend in consumer healthcare. But I think that it still does not inform the majority of our products in Europe and Latin America, which are treatment markets, compared with North America and Asia, where consumers are working much more in the area of prevention than intervention. And why prevention is so important is that it keeps consumers who are well, it stops them being ill. And you know, this is English and it's semantics. I hope it translates into all the languages. But pharma is about making ill people well, and consumer products are about making well people stay well. So that's the first benefit. Consumers don't want to get sick, and they'll take medicines in advance if it's appropriate to prevent. It's very good for us because a consumer who is preventing is consuming more medicines, whereas a consumer who's treating may be in the market once or twice a year, which is one of the reasons that we have this little joke in our company about slow-moving consumer goods, because many of you have come from fast-moving consumer goods, and OTC is not that. It's slow-moving consumer goods. Now, many of you have seen this chart before, although every year we update it, and I've added another color this year. These are the fastest growing categories within consumer healthcare, not necessarily the biggest. So you're not seeing systemic cold and flu. You're not seeing systemic pain in here. They are big but slow growth. If we take aside erectile dysfunction, which is only in 3 countries and is relatively small but has big growth, what you are seeing are red categories which are pure prevention, taken hopefully every day or every week. You're seeing 1 black category only. This is global data. It would be different from Europe. We'd have much more black. So topical analgesics, essentially people are only using that product when they have topical pain. So red is prevention. Blue is, it can be either. It could be preventive, it could be treating. We get both aspects of that within the use of the brand. And a great example of how a company has made sense or helped to make sense of a prevention category is a brand called Ollie. Now, Ollie and the man who set up Ollie, a man called Eric, decided about 5 or 6 years ago that he could find a space in the US market for vitamins, minerals, and supplements. And everyone said, well, good luck to you, because it's almost impossible. But he proved you can do it. And the brand Ollie, and I have no idea why he chose that brand name. It seems a nonsense name, but it obviously worked. Launched in 2015. By 2018, in US dollars at factory prices, the business was 177 million. That's a fantastic achievement. If you want to turn that into public prices, retail selling prices, it's about 250 million, only in the US. And essentially, this gentleman and his team decided that there was a significant unmet demand, even in this crowded marketplace, and that it was a sector where all the rules of marketing were being broken. Everything was focused on ingredients. Now, any of you who've ever studied what's called the benefits ladder, and this is something we do in our CHC Training Academy, is we talk about the benefits ladder. The first level is features. What is it? The second level is functional benefits. What's the benefit of taking this in a functional sense? And then thirdly is emotional benefits. How does it make me feel? Now, there are some additional rungs. There's the rung about giving back and protecting the environment, and then there's something which is very me-focused. That's the 5th rung, and it's a new one, and this very much applies to Gen Z and millennials. Now, here, the innovator decided, first of all, we have to make these products very focused on benefits. And secondly, focused on an audience that normally does not buy these type of products. Young people, particularly millennials, and particularly women. And so marketing to millennial women using the media that they are using, which is social media and e-commerce, and very in your face, has created this huge success that we see here. I won't do the whole case study, but I just want to show a couple of examples of how you can make sense even in a crowded and fragmented market. So if you look at the top of this, you'll see that a product that was called Digestion, after they launched this product called Digestion, which obviously is about helping you to digest your food, they found that actually consumers didn't really have a good concept of what digestion was. So they changed the name very quickly to Balanced Belly, and that did the trick. Consumers started to buy the product. So what was originally a line of gummy-type products, at that point in the market 5 years ago, when gummies went from being a child's product to an adult product, with very bright and attractive packaging, presenting benefits, the range was developed very, very substantially. So underperforming SKUs, taken out or changed very quickly. This company believes in that concept that we hear from Reckitt Benckiser, for example. Fail fast. If it's wrong, identify it, put it right. If it succeeds, understand that quickly, build on it. Don't stand there and say, right, we'll come back and have a look in 2 years. It's daily monitoring of performance. It's very rapidly line extension. Now, this is in the US where, to be honest, once you create that bridgehead, which is very expensive, you need to leverage that very quickly. So we saw lots of line extensions coming into the market, building on the gummies. On-the-go products for the pocket, nutraceuticals, cosmeceuticals, protein bars, smoothies, all the products that this age group, here we're talking about the 20 to 25-year age group when this was launched, those are the products that people of that age group were using for their lunch, for their snacks, and so on and so forth. tying up with a beauty chain called Sephora, spin-off many years ago from the Boots company in the US. And then also at once establishing a price point which was upper medium at $12 to $13 RSP, building on that to get more premium into the marketplace, and it worked. Secondly is probiotics, and again, this seems to be a very known space, but it's not. We're really only at the beginning of the end of the first phase. There's a long way to go. Probiotics is in terms of categories with scale, is our fastest growing in percentage. It's the second biggest contributor to market growth after systemic analgesics, which has low growth but a much, much bigger rate of sale. Probiotics are running at about $4 billion globally. On current growth rates, in 10 years it will be up to 8, but we think it will be much, much more than that. Best case is 10, but it could be even more than that. And the reason for that, and I've shown this slide before, is because we are completely changing our view as an industry and scientists and marketeers about this concept of digestive health. We used to call it gastrointestinal, GI, but increasingly we hear it called digestive health. We say turn that round. It's health through digestion. There's such a firm link between the gut and the brain and the gut, that controls every aspect of the human body. Now the products, the probiotics, prebiotics, combinations, enzyme, there are going to be so many variations here, do not yet exist that deliver all the benefits we would like. But we're working with fermenters who have some amazing developments underway, and will be bringing to market in the next 5 years some really outstanding products with good science behind them. And I've shown this before, and I'm not going to go into detail. Here's the first phase, which was gut health, focused on diarrhea, either associated with antibiotic or travel diarrhea. Now we're seeing brands for constipation. We're seeing some very interesting developments in IBS, a brand called Kijamir in Germany doing remarkably well. The whole concept of immunity, which we think will lead into probiotics that will help to alleviate or prevent allergy. The feminine healthcare market has been in existence for some years, but that can be micro-segmented into menopause and other female life stages. The whole area of mother and baby, metabolic syndrome, including weight loss, including energy, and very significantly, and we are working with a company that's looking at probiotics as a way of limiting the onset of diabetes, and then everything else you can imagine. There is not a part of the body that can't be improved through the new generation of probiotics, prebiotics, and combinations that we expect to come into the marketplace. Those of you who've been at our various conferences over the last few years will have seen the Omnibiotic presentation from Allergosan of Austria, a line of products which is highly segmented. Here you can see just a few of the products. It's not just for gut health or liver, it's also for energy, for weight loss, metabolic syndrome, a whole range, very high growth. The manufacturer does not ferment. That's the fermenter is in Netherlands, a totally separate company. High growth, number one brand in Germany. And we have colleagues here from Be My Eye, and quite recently they did a survey in 6 countries on the most spontaneously recommended probiotics. And in Germany, Allergosan's Omnibiotic was spontaneously recommended by 42% of pharmacists. The highest recommendation we found for any brand in any one of the 6 countries where we conducted this mystery shopper program. Now, taking that concept of good health through digestion brings us into an area that I think has huge potential in the future, which is food allergy and intolerance. Every one of us in this room, everyone in the world, is allergic or intolerant to a food or a food ingredient, and for most of us it's benign. The worst is going to happen is a little bit of tingling, but it can be extreme. There are cases reported in the last year in this country of a young girl, I think she was about 15 years of age. She was going on a flight and she bought a cookie at the airport. She didn't realize it had peanuts in it. She was allergic to peanuts, and at the other end of the flight she was taken to intensive care and she died a day or 2 later. We also had the example of some boys fooling around One boy threw a cheese sandwich at another boy who was lactose intolerant, and he died as a result of it. Now, those are extreme cases, but this is a sector waiting to happen. We have a few brands. We have a lot of brands in China, but outside of China, relatively few brands that are targeting this area. But when you look at the symptoms of just food intolerance, this isn't all about the gut. Again, the gut-brain link means that that difficulty of digestion can cause problems of respiratory problems, dermatological problems, problems of metabolism. So this is absolutely a market waiting to happen. We don't have the right products and not enough research is going into this, but it will in the future. Then there's cannabis, and at the end of the day we have a speaker on cannabis. I'm just going to recap very quickly on our view of cannabis, and may I say that very few people agree. I think it's almost like that joke if you ask, sorry, if there are Greeks in the room, if you ask 10 Greeks for a point of view, you get 11 opinions. I think that's the case with cannabis. Everybody has a different opinion on this. I'm very interested to hear what our end-of-day speaker will have. We are, in fact, my colleague Bernadette is going to come up in a moment and talk to us about MedTech, is working on a report, and we will have a new report next February on cannabis. At the moment, we're very excited about what we're seeing in the medical cannabis market. We're very aware that there is a very substantial prescription medical cannabis market, not obviously for the consumer end of the spectrum, except if we have switches. Now, there are lots of people who say there will never be switches, and there are optimists like me who believe that we will have switches. And we've put a value on that at the moment. That value will be changed probably, and maybe a bigger value by the time our report comes out in February. What we have at the moment is a CBD market in many countries of the world that's focused on supplements, that's focused on topicals, and I don't have it here because it's very new, vaping. The same technology that has nicotine vaping products can readily be applied to CBD. And that's already a $1 billion market, about half in the US and just over half in the rest of the world. There are two other sectors we're not looking at, that's beauty and food and lifestyle, but all of this could be a market of over $10 billion in the next 10 years. But I'm now thinking that's a very, very cautious forecast. Another category that looks very interesting is reproductive health or sexual health. At the moment, there's a very substantial market for condoms and other contraceptives, a conception sector, and the beginning of what will be the biggest part of it, which is the erectile dysfunction market. And I believe we were the first consultants to actually do valuation modeling in this sector. We were asked by Lilly before their tie-up with Sanofi, so this is 7 years ago, to make some estimates of what this category could look like in the future. And the numbers were just so amazing, we thought our model was wrong. So we kept going back, revisiting the model. Finally, we were pretty sure, even by scaling every assumption, we kept scaling down. And we presented to our client who said, well, there were some issues I can't talk about. But the biggest issue was that a pharmaceutical company only wanted to model the use for men who have a diagnosed clinical problem. So they said, please take out of your forecast anything to do with fun and enjoyment. As somebody who has a lot of fun in life and enjoys life, I said, but that's wrong. You're missing 3/4 of the potential. They said, no, take it out. But it was still a very attractive model. So we were worried that when these products started coming to market, whereas we see fun in many parts of the market for sexual health or reproductive health, a big concern was that we would see very boring advertising when these products came to market. The erectile dysfunction products came to market. Now, there's a figure there of 20 billion. That's what we thought this total sector would be worth, with erectile dysfunction being over half. It is clearly going to be a much smaller category than we thought. There are major regulatory hurdles in the biggest market, the US. And it took Pfizer a long time to decide they wanted to be in this market. And finally, the launch in the UK was managed not even by the consumer business, it was managed by the pharmaceutical division. But the one thing you can say is that the advertising embraces the concept of fun. And here's the launch commercial, which I think a number of you will know, but it's worth showing again.
You've done it all. You've broken every code and pulled the rebel to the floor. Come up and see me, make me smile. I'll do what you want.
4.3 million men in the UK experience erectile problems. Viagra Connect is now available without prescription.
Now, I'm rather uncomfortable with the man presenting about women's health, but although this is Nina's great work, I'm not going to bring her up, so I'm just trying to be a good Nina here and just show you some highlights of what Nina did for our New Paradigms report. Women are half the population. They consume about 60%, personally consume about 60% of all OTCs. They purchase about 85 to 90%. We think of women's health as being products specifically for women, and that's the category that says core women is about $10 billion at factory prices. In fact, that's the smallest part of the market. Where women are consuming more are general products for all the family. And the companies that recognize that and position specifically for women seem to do very well. And here's a great example. This is a product called Eve. Now, this is from Japan. The market for systemic analgesics flatlined. All the products were being positioned for all the family. Buy this product, anyone can use. And an independent pharmaceutical company called SSP, which then became part of Boehringer, became part of Sanofi, always positioned it for women, choosing the name Eve, the first woman, even using the Western script, using well-known presenters who are either TV stars, film stars, models, and in a market growing by 1%, a systemic analgesics market growing by 1%, this brand has had 9% growth and now is the market leader by a huge margin with 100 million of sales. I don't know the profitability, but I would think it would be very high. Similarly, and I don't have time to talk about that. Similarly, the number one supplements line here in the UK is Probiotics, and it's fascinating to see how that has gone from being the Well Woman line, and what a great name that is. There's a Well Man line as well. It's great to see how that Well Woman line has been extended, first of all, to the 50-plus age group, and then most recently to 70-plus. And we're told that the 70-plus line extension is in the top 5 SKUs. Now, it used to be said that women and men do not want to be reminded of their age. And I remember we used to run a case study of a J&J shampoo called Affinity, which was marketed for women over the age of 40, and it was a total failure. But when it comes to health, women want the honesty of saying, you have special needs, and I can meet those needs. So that's why we're very excited about women's health. Now, I'm going to ask for our last, because we're not going over all 15 today, for our last of the Infinity Zones, I'm going to ask Bernadette de Villiers to come and tell us about MedTech and a very exciting part of that called Femtech.
Good morning. So I'm presenting on MedTech and Femtech and about how science and technology is transforming the healthcare market. I'll just put them all up there. So, MedTech is a rapidly evolving part of consumer healthcare, and it really is the perfect example about how consumer healthcare is expanding and transforming into something quite new. So beyond pills and bottles and creams and tubes, into, in this case, hardware, software, and data. Products typically command a very high price point, in some cases very high, and other features of the products are that they're very consumer-centric, they're personalized, and data-driven with connected capabilities, such as Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and the ability to be controlled by apps. And MedTech provides companies the potential to build category presence and gain market penetration, especially by the launch of adjacent products launched under the same brand name. So a perfect example is Nurofen Fever Smart thermometer, and this is a smart, digital, non-invasive thermometer that continuously monitors baby's and infant's temperature and can transmit that information to the parents. And this video really shows all of the features of medtech devices that I've just been talking about.
Introducing Nurofen for Children Fever Smart Temperature Monitor, which allows the continuous and accurate monitoring of a baby or child's temperature direct to your smartphone. Nurofen Fever Smart Temperature Monitor connects to an app and is simple to set up. The baby's details can be entered simply into the app. Then, the Fever Smart Temperature Monitor is applied under the baby's arm so that the sensor is close to the armpit. Always remember to keep the arm down during use. This is important for the reading. The accurate temperature reading will automatically appear, updating once a minute. No need to wake your child, allowing them to sleep undisturbed and get the rest they need. When the baby's temperature becomes high, Fever Smart will send a notification. Always remember to read instructions before medication is given. Medication can be tracked and reminders of last medication can be set. Additional observations and symptoms can be noted on the app. Remember to always observe your child. All this information can be shown to a healthcare professional if needed. The device and data storage are compliant with required security standards. Nurofen for Children Fever Smart Temperature Monitor. Feel in control as you monitor your child's fever.
So then we have TENS devices. Now, TENS devices are not new, but in the last 5 years, there have been a number of new products that have come to market with additional features and connected capabilities. Now, what we've seen from these products is that they typically have a fast takeoff in sales and then a fast erosion of sales. And this has been true for US, European, and Asian markets. And the category peaked in 2016, 2018, sales had dropped by 35%. But this, of course, reflects a lot of first-time or one-time purchases. Tinnitus is a very interesting area. So it's a completely niche, uncluttered area in terms of there are very few products for tinnitus. One of which, however, is Antinitis by the owner Acloma, launched in 2014. So this is a first-in-class EU-approved medical device for tinnitus, and it works with a transparent patch, which is worn behind the ear, which actually sends a signal to the auditory system, which regulates the auditory system and diminishes the effects of tinnitus. And then Femtech. So Femtech is a fascinating area of medtech. It's going through a boom phase at the moment. There's been 1 billion raised in investment in the last 3 years, which is up from 60 million in 2012. And that growth reflects years of underinvestment, lack of innovation, and unmet demand, principally because there's been a hesitation to commercially approach things which are considered sensitive or awkward aspects of women's health and anatomy. So Femtech categories cover period and fertility apps, pelvic health care, period care, pregnancy and nursing, fertility devices, sexual wellness, and diagnostics. So a wide array. So here, one which has been a lot of growth recently in development are pelvic floor trainers. This is an award-winning pelvic floor trainer by Pelviva by Femida, and this uses patented pulse technology to train the pelvic floor muscles. But however, it's such a fast area that this is now not outdated, but for instance, I'll come back to that one and move quickly to this one. So this is Elvi, which is a smart Kegel trainer, and this is an app. This is a device which sends continuous real-time feedback on your pelvic exercises to an app, and it's been a flagship product of Elvi, which is a London startup. Now I'll go back. Then we have fertility tracking apps. So these are enormously popular. Apps which track menstruation, fertility, ovulation windows. And this one is Natural Cycles, which is the first FDA and EU-approved contraception app. It has millions of registered users and hundreds of thousands of active users. And in general, these apps show no signs of diminishing in terms of either investment or usage, with over 3/4 of women surveyed saying that they intend to use fertility apps. Fertility monitors, again, a huge area of very recent growth, development, and advancing technologies. A number of products entered just in the last few years, and actually a number entered in the last 12 months. And these feature different types of technology, much higher accuracy and performance, and a great many more technology features. Now, going back to LV also, apart from their flagship Kegel trainer, they also do a line in breast pumps. Now, breast pumps are an outstanding area of recent innovation and development. So newer models these days are cordless. They can be worn under clothes. They can be worn as single or double. And they're lighter, they're sleeker, they're quieter, and they're better engineered, and they work better. Now, LV has raised 32 million this year, which is the largest ever femtech investment to date. And just to give an example of femtech just as a subset of medtech, they, by consensus estimates, we're looking at the potential to reach 50 billion in sales by 2025. Very finally, looking over the horizon, it's not there, over the horizon of products, well, I can remember them, so there is no way to overstate the degree to which investment and, well, development in science and technology is transforming the consumer healthcare space. So in this 30 years, 20 years, but it's coming. So 3 examples, for example, are wearables that can monitor skin and sweat and identify biomarkers and microparticles of, for example, viruses, bacteria, and pollutants, and that they'll be able to discern those and then tell the wearer what there is on their skin. So that's one instance. A second is 3D printing, which has the ability to print drugs, potentially in the local pharmacy, hyper-personalized, and these can be shaped and tailored with both the dosage and constituents to the patient. And finally, another example are nanotechnology, where you can insert microparticles of OTC medicine into nanoparticles that can be then injected into immune cells that can travel directly to the site of inflammation. So those are just 3 examples of how extraordinarily science and technology will be shaping healthcare in the future. Okay, thanks very much.
Apologies to Bernadette because we couldn't actually show the final version, but we'll make sure that's circulated, Bernadette, with those missing slides. So there are 8 categories that we don't have time to talk about today, but they're all in the report, and we're happy during the course of today to talk about natural and organic products, sleep, stress and mood, obesity, diabetes. Now here, it's very interesting to say that we're not talking at all about treatments for diabetes. We're talking about the possibility of surrounding consumers who suffer from diabetes with products that make life more pleasant. And that isn't just for diabetes. This could be for oncology, for cardiovascular disease, for Alzheimer's. We think this is going to be a very important future area. Companion products. Diagnostics, many of what we've talked about, many of the opportunities we've talked about today need a diagnosis up front. Now, whether that's a clinical diagnosis or a home diagnosis is not the issue, but we will see a much greater growth in the area of diagnostics. Pharmacy point of care, which is how we position many of these new products and categories to the consumer with a recommendation of the pharmacist. E-commerce we've talked about, and for this audience, possibly not so important, but in a global scale, the emerging markets are the highest source of growth. The emerging markets now is over 50% of consumption by value of consumer products. Now, our ambassador, he doesn't know he's our ambassador, he'd ask for a lot of money, but our ambassador is Mohammed Farah, Sir Mo Farah, and the reason is that as he trains to become the world's fastest marathon runner, he needs to pick up his pace. And you all know for the last 3 years we've been saying that the OTC industry is all about pace. And pace means P for pharmacy, It's still the bedrock of the business. We still have to get the benefit, the halo of the pharmacist behind our products at point of sale. The 6 core categories cannot support the growth that we need. We therefore need to go into adjacent categories such as reproductive health, such as cannabis. C is the consumer. Queen consumer, as we've said, is at the heart of our industry, and we have to engage through e-commerce, digital marketing, and the like. And we're on a journey, and we're working with many of our clients, some of whom are in this room, on that journey. A number of my team are here, so please talk to us about any needs you have. That's the end of our joint presentation. We won't take questions because we, as always, run a little bit late. Now I'm going to hand back to Nina. Thank you very much.